Welcome to CS Week Marketplace webinar series. CS Week Marketplace offers fresh perspectives and strategies presented monthly by knowledge specialists from the Conference 39 Platinum and Gold sponsors. I am John Sild and I'm with CS Week. I'll be your moderator today along with Bruce Hertzner, Senior Principal at Internoc. Please mark your calendars. CS Week Conference 40 will be held next month from April 25th through the 29th at the lovely Phoenix Convention Center in Phoenix, Arizona. Please visit our website at csweek.org for more information and to register. This program will be recorded and available for playback, along with our other archived presentations later this afternoon. You will find it by selecting Marketplace under the Webinars drop-down menu on the csweek.org homepage. Attendees are encouraged to upload questions to the Q&A panel as they arise. However, all questions will be held until after the presentation for the Q&A segment. Please ensure that you address your questions to all panelists so that we see them. Today's webinar is Making SME Engagements More Impactful, a case study on PG&E's Business Energy Report program. Again, I want to welcome our presenters and our moderator, Bruce, today for joining us, and I also want to thank you, our listener, for joining us today. Bruce, take it away.
Thank you very much, John. As mentioned, my name is Bruce Hertzner with Internoc. I'm a senior principal of our brand and marketing team. What I'd like to do is to begin with an introduction of our speakers here today and describe a little bit about the flow that we're going to work with. So I'm going to begin with a quick overview of the strategic drivers behind our topic today, and then I'm going to touch on some of the underlying technology. I'll then turn it over to David Thayer, who's an expert project manager at Pacific Gas and Electric. In that capacity, he leads the Business Energy Reports initiative that we'll be focusing on today. More broadly, his role involves leveraging behavioral science and metrics-driven decision-making to create meaningful products for just about anybody that appreciates using electricity, and meaningful experiences for PG&E's customers, both online and offline. We'll then hear from Dr. Beth Karlin, who's the research director at USC's Norman Lear Center, where she studies the role of new media and technology in social and environmental change. And some of her current projects investigate a wide variety of topics, including public acceptance of new technology, home energy management, and documentary film campaigns. And she's also the founder of the Sea Change Institute, and it's in that capacity that she's been working with PG&E and Internoc on the initiative we're going to talk about today. So I'd like to begin with a look at the strategic background for our discussion and ask, why is customer engagement so critical, and what's so special about small and medium enterprises, or SMEs? And we can begin with one major driver, which is that many energy suppliers and utilities today are facing significant pressures on profitability. On the one hand, there are revenue pressures like the threat of flattening demand. Data from the EIA released just this week showed that total electricity sales in the U.S. in 2015 fell 1.1% from 2014, and that marks the 5th time in the past 8 years that electricity sales have fallen. At the same time, 70% of utilities report that they expect stagnant load growth in the coming years, and 10% actually expect to see a decline. So obviously concerns there. And there's also a constant issue of customer churn for many utilities in competitive markets. Couple that with the risk of grid defection as customers adopt solar and other distributed energy resources, and that's putting further pressure on revenue. We can also think about cost pressures affecting profitability, and it's often very difficult for utilities to market their programs and services in a cost-effective way across their customer base. Many firms today face very low ROI from their existing revenue-driving programs. So all these pressures have a really big impact, and for instance, if we look at Europe's 20 largest utilities, a significant stat that was put out there last year is that these 20 largest utilities have experienced a dramatic decline in their market capitalization and are in fact down over 50% or over $500 billion since 2008. So that's one major trend. Another one is at the same time regulatory mandates are expanding faster than ever, requiring more time and resources from utilities to satisfy them. Think about a case like BC Hydro, where 2/3 of forecasted load growth must be met by conservation measures by 2020, and David will go into some similar background for PG&E. And then we think about major frameworks like the Clean Power Plan and the Paris Agreement, and these are all sending clear signals that no matter how those specific agreements shake out, the regulatory direction is quite clear. So utilities are looking at strategies to help drive that revenue, meet those mandates while controlling costs. And at the center of these strategies are the customer understanding, customer trust, and customer engagement. And that's because those customer relationships are levers that you can pull to address all of those pressures that we talked about. If we break it down, customer engagement drives program participation and customer satisfaction. That helps keep regulators happy and improves rate case success. Engaged customers are more satisfied, meaning utilities are more likely to retain customers in areas where there's retailer competition, and thus reduce their dependency on customer acquisition. And understanding and engaging your customers also paves the way to offering new products and services, and gets you to the point when customers view you as the definitive trusted energy partner and are coming to you first for all of their energy-related needs. So we are definitely seeing utilities respond to this focus and this pivot around the customer, and they are responding with investment in this area. And 76% of utility decision makers reported recently that they have made or are making investments in customer engagement. Business customers are the most important market for utilities to focus on. In case of many utilities, they may serve more residential customers by number, but those residential customers use less energy. It's not unusual in North America to see business customers, meaning small, medium, large, commercial, and industrial, accounting for over 2/3 of energy consumption. And the business segment typically also makes up well over half of energy demand, so it also plays a highly significant role when we talk about engaging them to maintain grid balance. So your business customers are critical to you, but the business market is also the most difficult to engage, and largely that's because of their complexity. When we think about the residential segment, it tends to be largely homogeneous in terms of the ways they use energy and how they can be reached through marketing. In contrast, consider the business sector. There are thousands of different NAICS codes and industry classification codes for small businesses alone. And the needs of small businesses also vary dramatically from the large commercial and industrial customers who have more complex needs and look to you for different services and different engagement. So this complexity and this diversity has led in many cases to a lack of insight that utilities have about the businesses and that they serve and the challenges that those customers face. And in the worst case scenario, this can result in utilities sending disconnected messages to that group, leading to confused, dissatisfied, and ultimately tuned out customers, which is what we're trying to avoid. And on top of this complexity, there's also another confounding factor, which is a paradigm shift occurring in the behavior and expectations of businesses that you serve. And this is driven by choice, and that's choice in a couple of different areas. On the one hand, choice around technologies and services like solar and distributed energy resources that are new to the market. And businesses are looking at them and trying to figure out, well, what's available now to me? And I see uptake in other areas, and what do these technologies and opportunities mean to me, and who can help me to understand what I should be doing, and what role does my utility, my energy provider, play in that. And there's also, of course, choice when we think about choice in energy providers in many areas where there's retail competition. And as those same customers are making choices about their provider, we know that businesses are influenced by more than just price. The bar has been set much higher these days in terms of expectations that consumers have for any service provider that they work with. They're not comparing your service levels to those they get from other utilities. Rather, they're comparing you to the Ubers and the Amazons and the Googles of the world. And these are customer-obsessed organizations who have perfected the practice of understanding their customers, looking at data that's available, and really have reset the bar much higher in terms of the level of service and personalization that customers expect. It is a very powerful moment on that theme when a utility can show a restaurant owner how much energy they use for cooling relative to other full-service restaurants in the same city with the same square footage and the same operating hours. And telling those customers what steps they can take in a personalized fashion to manage their energy use better is compelling and helpful and engaging. And when customers act on that insight that the utility has shared with them, that improves the cost effectiveness of your program communications, as well as increasing overall engagement. But what that means is that you've got to provide personalized experiences and services in order to elevate the relationship to get to that status of a trusted partner dealing with trusted clients. As one example, we know that getting the vertical right, getting the business type right, is really critical to targeting a high-impact message, and you'll see David and Beth touch on this shortly. Our research shows that getting strong visuals, having strong visuals in your communications to anchor the reader around their own business type. In this example here, we're showing an energy report, a business energy report for a laundromat. That anchoring makes a really big difference in terms of how the reader trusts and perceives and is likely to retain and act on the information and the insight that you're delivering. But in order to get that message right, many utilities need to know much, much more about their customers, really more than the customers themselves. And the first step there is to build a holistic view of every single customer's energy operations. And it sounds like a tall order, but the data is available to be pulled together and analyzed. We're talking about data like customer-provided data, site metadata, data from meters or billing systems, third-party data like weather or NAICS codes, numerous other sources. Pulling it together and analyzing it to really help you understand what are all my individual customers dealing with? What do they look like as a group? And what can I communicate in terms of insight to an individual business to impact them? And it's those insights that let you target those interactions and ultimately satisfy and engage customers by sharing that value with them and helping them understand what you've learned about them, helping them understand their own energy use better, and helping them to do better. So David and Beth are going to show you more of what that looks like in the field. Specifically for this program we're talking about today, using an outbound print report channel. But I wanted to point out that the enabling technology for this is Energy Intelligence Software, or EIS. So this is the engine underneath the analytics and the delivery. And EIS it's an integrated analytics and customer engagement platform. It lets you pull together those large and diverse data sets into one data agnostic view or one data agnostic source. And it tends to be lightweight, seamlessly integrating into existing systems, the idea being that you can deploy it rapidly and get to value quickly. And then building on the combined view, it leverages behavioral science, machine learning, detailed segmentation, industry benchmarking, all these elements to surface that value in the data and make it insightful and engaging so that you can share it both within your utility and with the customers through multiple integrated channels. In this case, we're going to be looking at business energy reports, again, to communicate and drive shared value. So just to recap my section here before I turn it over to David, By virtue of their size, consumption, and demand, business customers are certainly the most critical to you. You have a lot of information about them, most utilities do, but they're very diverse and complex groups. So analysis and engagement strategy needs to be specifically designed with them in mind to be successful. We know that, finally, that EIS is the enabling technology, allows you to derive value from the data by collecting and analyzing it at scale, and then engaging customers directly with one platform. So I've touched on the business drivers and the underlying technology. And as you hear from our other speakers today, think about the sweet spot where our three presentations meet, where the technology, the program design, and the application of behavioral theory all combine to drive towards improvement and maximize delivered value. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to David Thayer, who's going to give us a deeper dive into PG&E's motivations for engaging SMEs and the specifics of their Business Energy Reports program with Enernoc and the Sea Change Institute. So David, I'm making you the presenter, and it's over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Bruce. All right, so I'm David Thayer, an expert product manager here at PG&E. Since this is our kind of lead up to our CS Week presentation, I wanted to give everyone a brief background about who we are, why we're interested in engaging SMEs, small, medium enterprises through this channel, and a little bit on the research that we've been doing over the last few years, leading into Beth, who's going to talk about some of the really interesting things that we're doing now and moving forward. So to get things started, Pacific Gas and Electric has been delivering energy in Northern California for a bit over 100 years now. We cover about half of California and have around 15 million Northern California customers. One of the really, I think, unique things about PG&E is that we've been consistently driving our electric supply towards non-GHG emitting sources, and we're up over 50% right now. And I think a big part of kind of our commitment to the environment, as well as to some of California's more strategic long-term goals, is both the generation of cleaner, GHG-free energy, as well as our commitment to energy efficiency. And so really that commitment to energy efficiency started in the late 70s and early 80s with the decoupling of the generation and distribution of the electric and gas grid in California. We're a decoupled utility. There are, I think, around 20 states now that are decoupled, which really just means that we have kind of separated the revenue from sales. So we don't make more money when we sell more electricity or gas. Really, this has given us the incentive, along with the shareholder incentive mechanism that's been put in place in California, to incentivize the utilities to go after that top of the loading order first resource in energy efficiency, trying to reduce the load where we can through EE, and then kind of fill in that additional load as the state continues to grow and our business customers kind of develop their additional needs. So really the big takeaway for decoupling here is that we don't make more money by selling more energy, and so we've got a really strong incentive to push energy efficiency into the market, and you can see that we typically have a few $100 million budget for our energy efficiency programs each year. So the big question, in my mind anyway, is how has that worked? I think since the late 70s and early 80s, the Rosenfeld graph here shows per capita electricity consumption in the overall United States versus that of California. And you can really see that since the late 70s, California has remained relatively flat for consumption per capita. So I think one of the kind of key drivers, there are a lot of different policies that have made this possible, and a lot of fluctuations in the market as well. But one of the key drivers for us in being an actor in the California market is really promoting that energy efficiency. And the energy efficiency program, since we have been doing this for quite a long time, we've gone through a number of kind of significant transitions over the last 40 years, really. Early on, EE was really driven by kind of a one-for-one replacement of older technologies for more efficient technologies. I think we've seen a lot of success moving through product categories. Typically lighting in the commercial space has been just a no-brainer for many, many years. Things are getting much more challenging now in reaching those customers, making projects cost-effective. And so we end up looking for kind of alternate methods where we can continue to drive engagement with customers as well as reaching our energy efficiency goals. So a lot of that direction these days is moving toward more behavioral interventions, changing the way that people act and operate their facilities, ends up driving lots of kind of behavioral EE. And so you start to see that now with the home energy reports, which folks are very familiar with, have had a ton of success in the residential energy efficiency space. It's one of the really big opportunities that we see for our commercial space as well, but it's such a harder impact to make with those SMB customers because they're much less homogeneous. They have lots of unique needs and very unique businesses as well. So a bit of that segmentation that Bruce was talking about really kind of hinges on the success of these programs. And the better that we can get at that tends to lead to more effective programs. And I'll talk a little bit about how that worked with our energy report program in the past, and Beth will talk a bit about how we're moving forward with that. So to dive into the energy report trial, we've been engaged with formerly Pulse and now Enernoc for the last number of years, certainly both on the DR side, but as well on the energy efficiency side. We started this first trial in 2013 and ran it for 2 years. And the kind of core of the trial is that it's paper-based reports. There's a welcome report, and there was 6 bi-monthly reports following that. Really, the program was designed as a randomized controlled trial with a treatment and control group, and it was designed to detect a 0.5% effect with a 95% confidence interval. For those of you who aren't Beth and don't live in statistics world, we were really driving for kind of high visibility into the accuracy of the energy savings that were driven by these reports. Unfortunately, this program, when we ran it with the 15,000 customers, we weren't able to detect those savings at that high level of confidence, and so we did a number of surveys with those customers to understand kind of the more qualitative impact of the reports. Before I jump into those qualitative aspects, just to talk a bit more about the report itself, each report contains 4 of these similar content areas. We have feedback that kind of starts the report, so it creates some continuity that this is a holistic report experience. It's not just one-off mailers that the customer is receiving. They see that they've kind of been tracking over the course of time that the program has been running. One of the core components of all of our behavior programs at this point in time is the social norms, or that social comparative. diagram where customers are compared to similar businesses. Again, the segmentation here is just so critical because of the kind of unique nature of so many SMBs. It's really important to make sure that the comparison group that we're kind of showing them against is relevant to them and makes sense in the context that they're reading this report. Without having that kind of level of information about them and showing them that we know who they are, we see that the engagement with the report really drops off quickly. We've also got an awareness to kind of target the information in the report to a certain end use. See here, cooking, try and disag the amount of energy that is going toward that end use for this customer. And then finally, we present tips as well as kind of low-cost behavior changes that they can make, as well as any rebates that we have available, again, that are specifically geared toward that customer segment and the needs of that customer. So to give you a little bit more on how we saw things end up, we were really glad to see a very high level of engagement with these reports. So in the surveys that we ran with a subsegment of the 15,000 customers that received these reports, 82% said that they recall receiving the reports. And remember, these surveys were done a few months after the report program had ended, so having that high level of recall was very encouraging for us. We also saw that the reports are actually engaged. I think one of the challenging aspects of doing any sort of direct mail outreach, whether it's marketing or for an energy efficiency program, is just kind of getting past that initial receiving the mail and having someone decide whether or not they're going to open it or just drop it in the recycle bin immediately. So we're glad to see that people are reviewing these and actually reading them. Also that they're reaching the right person. I think this again goes to kind of the relevance that we present with the report, but we saw that an extremely high level of the decision makers for these facilities, for these SMB customers, were the ones that were actually seeing the report and engaging with it. And also just the level of action that was taken as a result of the report. It was great to see that 70% of folks reported that they took some action after receiving the reports. I think, as many folks can expect from this kind of light touch experience, a lot of the changes that people made were around lighting behavior changes, changing thermostat set points, and plug load behavioral changes. So really the kind of brief behavior changes that you can enact quickly, cheaply, easily were the core of what people were responding with. As well, I think one of the things that's interesting about this as an energy efficiency program is that it's also an opportunity to promote our programs with customers that are generally very hard to reach. So along with the energy efficiency goals we have a number of goals around driving customers to engage more online, to leverage more of our self-service tools, and then also to kind of take an additional step toward energy efficiency to learn more about the programs and rebates that are available for customers. So I think we were really encouraged to see that a lot of folks were taking an additional step based on the information that we were providing. But of course, there are always challenges with any program that or any trial that you run. And so I think one of the biggest findings for us was that we could have done better in the engagement and the usefulness with the reports. I think this was one of the big findings that we took into designing our next experiment and the next set of interventions that Beth will talk a little more about. But this is an area where we knew that the program was driving some good engagement. We were reaching the right people. We were reaching them with some good information, but not everyone was taking kind of that next step or really saw it as a useful asset to them. So I think that was one of the areas that we saw that, okay, there's something to this energy report, but we can make it even more useful, and so we kind of set about how we can do that. So overall, we weren't able to identify conclusive energy savings, unfortunately, with this first trial. We also weren't able to show specifically that the customers that were receiving these reports were engaging at higher levels with our energy efficiency programs. I think that's one of the areas that these programs offer a lot of potential, but we didn't quite get it right in how to hook them into our other EE programs. On the engagement effectiveness, I think one of the things that folks are always concerned about when doing outreach campaigns is what the impact on the call center is going to be. We saw a relatively low engagement with the call center with this very kind of specific new approach. Thinking back to 2013 was definitely sending this type of information out was a very new way to engage with customers. We've since seen those rates actually drop since we've rolled out additional groups of customers. But we also saw really high survey response rates. So a number of the reports had surveys attached to the bottom of them. Typically, I think the kind of rule of thumb for these types of engagements is somewhere around 1%. But we saw a fairly strong 4% return rates on these mailers. So it was clear that there was a lot there that some customers were really engaging with it, were trying to get usefulness out of it. But we couldn't pinpoint what was absolutely working for customers and what wasn't. And so it brings us to our new approach, the new trial that we are in field with right now, that Beth will go into much more deeply, expanded the treatment population so that we could really hopefully derive that statistically significant savings value. But we also took a very new approach to designing that interaction. We wanted to really figure out what elements of the reports worked for customers and what was engaging, and learn how we can test those elements better. And so that's going to dive into our research approach. Let me just turn it over to Beth.
All right. Thank you, David. So I am going to, as David and Bruce said, going to talk about our research approach and what we've done specifically in this partnership. Just a brief introduction, as Bruce said, I have a primary appointment at the University of Southern California, where I work at the Norman Lear Center, and I'm trained primarily as a social psychologist, although my PhD is in applied behavioral social science. So I look at USC primarily in the media and entertainment landscape at how we can leverage storytelling and behavioral science to engage people on a wide variety of important social issues, from health behavior to supporting efforts to help global poverty issues to energy and environment climate change issues. And because the bulk of my doctoral work was in the energy efficiency space, I began to conduct more applied work, specifically working with groups like ENERNOC and PG&E, and in doing so founded the Sea Change Institute, which I'm presenting this work on behalf of. So whether we're looking at a television show or we're looking at an energy efficiency program like Business Energy Reports, I kind of start with the the primary hypothesis that you're designing a program of some sort to have an impact, that whatever it is you're doing, you have some goal of energy savings, customer engagement, what have you. And as an experimental social psychologist, I can't help but think, is the world really like a Kevin Costner film, right? If any of you haven't seen Field of Dreams, this won't make sense to you, but if you build it, will they come? So when we translate that idea to programs, we want to know, if you build it, if you develop an energy program, will that lead necessarily to savings? And I started my research looking at one area that is applicable today and where there's been some of the most research in this space, which is on energy feedback. So we conducted a statistical meta-analysis, myself and a couple colleagues, and we looked at over 100 studies that have been conducted. And we did find that if you build it overall, on average, if you provide people with information about energy use, coupled and or not with tips, that there will be savings. The mean effect size was highly significant, with average savings across the number of studies that have been conducted at 9%. But more equally, if not more importantly, was there was significant variability in these effects, from negative effects, meaning that people who receive feedback use more energy than those in a control group, to over 20% savings in some very small sample studies using high-tech approaches. So it led us and me to think that maybe that's not the right question, does it work? If you build it, will they come, might not be the right question. What we should be asking is, how does it work? And so we took those same studies and we conducted, through that meta-analysis, moderator analysis, and we found that whether that effect size was on the lower end or the higher end depended on a series of variables, including, as you can see, study population, duration, frequency, medium, disaggregation, what level of information, as well as the comparison message. We interestingly found, while so much of the work right now is focused on social comparisons, that across studies, what we found was that those with a goal-based comparison outperformed those with a social comparison. And so when we think about this kind of thinking about the who, what, when, where, and why of programs, we might look not to develop programs as recipes, as in here is a set of things that you do, X, Y, and Z, and it will always lead to savings, and think more in terms of that, how does it work? So if you want to cook one thing one time and have it taste one way, right, you would follow a recipe. But if you really want to be a chef, if you want to understand how to cook, if you want to understand how to develop energy programs, plural, that lead to energy savings, plural, over time, and understanding that humans change, and as David and Bruce both mentioned, they're very different, we would instead look at a different approach. So applying that food analogy, in order to learn to cook, you really need to understand ingredients. What is cumin? What is the difference between dried and fresh mint? You would want to understand the activities and processes. At what is the boil point of various oils? How does nonstick work differently from cast iron, right? And there's science behind that you really have little control over. And then understanding the metrics, developing a palette, so when you cook something, will you know whether it turned out, quote unquote, well or not? And for us, that's really understanding those key energy savings, customer satisfaction, and other metrics that we should be measuring in order to assess, iterate, and improve our programs. So from that, so taking that kind of different approach, while the former approach really lends itself well to RCTs, so that gold standard of designing and testing a program, and while that is really important, we think that you can expand upon that. This doesn't replace recipes, but it extends our ability to create new recipes over time, new programs. So if we understand the ingredients of programs, the scientific methods and techniques and how they work and how different strategies affect different people, and really build out our metrics so that we can test and iterate and improve over time, that we'll be more successful. So we've kind of developed a four-part approach that we have been so fortunate to be testing with NRNOC and PG&E in this business energy report program that we're kind of referring to as the platinum standard, going beyond the gold potentially. And that's the integration of behavioral theory, really starting with steps 1 and 2 here, understanding theory, understanding those metrics, those techniques, or those those techniques, and integrating those with key user testing, understanding, talking to consumers themselves, and understanding from both people who are receiving reports as well as potential customers what their needs and barriers are, and then from those two, triangulating to identify some testable hypotheses and pre-testing those. So tearing these reports apart, variable by variable, ingredient by ingredient, identifying those ingredients, linking them with hypotheses, testing them in the lab or online before we put them together into what could be an optimized report, and then taking that into the field so that RCT, that gold standard, is that step 4. And we try not to stop there, but even within the field, if we have large enough numbers, we can continue to A/B test. So I'm going to walk through those 4 steps and how we're applying them with this business energy report program. So first, when we look at behavioral theory, there are so many theories within. I largely, as I said at the beginning, pull from psychology. There are as many, if not more, theories if we added in sociology, anthropology, even drilling back down to some of the philosophical insights of our theoretical forefathers, but pulling some key behavioral theories from psychology going back to kind of the early 20th century, law of effect, classical conditioning. If you think about Skinner and his rats, we know a lot and we've learned a lot about how people respond, or how animals and people respond to prompts and to primes and to getting information about their behavior. Additionally, cognitive psychology adds another level where we can think about, when we give people information, how much information can people process, and making sure that we're presenting information in a way that it can be interpreted. Adding in later work in social psychology that kind of built on that, looking at things like goal-setting theory, the social norm theory that programs like this are really largely based on. And then some integrated models that have pulled in together these multiple theories. And we've developed an integrated model of our own that is yet unpublished, but we're working on a manuscript called eco-feedback intervention theory. And so what it seems for any feedback and or marketing intervention is that, as David really said, people need to perceive, so it needs to go to the right person. They need to actually look at it and not throw it into the trash bin. It needs to be interpreted correctly. That's where that cognitive psychology comes in. They need to understand what they're reading and be able to connect it in some way. It needs to refer to a self-relevant goal. There needs to be a motivational function, so they need to care about the information that's being provided. And then they need to be able to identify a specific action or set of actions that they can engage in. And it's important that that ability that they can engage in, different businesses and different residences have different things that they can or can't do depending on whether they own or rent their space, and so on and so forth. So from that, that gives us a lot of information pulling in that theory that we could go in and test, but it's important to test our hypotheses against the specific customers that we're trying to reach, because as Bruce said, they're very unique. So when we look at user testing, that is collecting data in the form of focus groups, interviews, surveys, user testing to understand how current and potential small to medium business owners, or actually current business owners, but current potential recipients of these reports interact and or would like to interact with these reports. And we actually have a paper that is under review right now, but we'll be presenting and publishing at the ACEEE proceedings this summer that synthesizes some findings from, I think, 10 studies that had been conducted by ENERNOC and by our team, and I'm just going to present a couple of findings on one that we found really interesting and is really underutilized in this space, which is our eye tracking study. So one of the things we did, one thing we know from psychology is that what people say and what's actually going on in their brains and their minds are not exactly the same thing. So what we did was we set up on this tablet reports, and then we asked people questions about them, and at the same time as we were asking, we had this little contraption that tracked where their eyes were going. And so what we found when we were interacting with them was you could see that this is showing the front side of the report. Somebody said, I don't have time to read this carefully, and to interpret this, these are heat maps. So red means that somebody spent more time looking at something. Blue, those colder colors, spent less time. So this person said, I don't have time to read it carefully, really didn't spend very much time at all. The part of the report where they spent the most time is this number, the 8,133. And if you're having a hard time reading these, feel free to make this full screen on your computer. There's one more slide at the end where there's a lot of information, so feel free to full screen it if you don't have that. And then on the right, this person said, I'm doing worse than others, what can you do? You can see they really spent most of their time looking at that historical comparison, so their energy use over time. Then when we looked at the back, this was really interesting, we found that we have these tips kind of front and center in the report, and both of the respondents that we talked to, we've spent so much time, and we continue to because we think it's important, crafting the text around these tips, but people are spending most of their time, regardless of what their mouths tell you, their eyes are telling you a story, which is, I like pictures. And we know this. We all love pictures. Our brains are primed to want to look at pictures. They are 1,000 words, right? And so we started drilling in, when I get to that next phase, a lot more into image research to make sure that we were optimizing not only the text, but the pictures as well. So then when we went into online experiments, triangulating from theory and what we learned from talking to actual customers, we developed a set of hypotheses that we could then test. And like I said, we broke that report down into the requisite pieces. The benchmarking, which is the energy feedback, you use this amount compared to the past, compared to a goal, compared to your peers. The second was on behavioral segmentation. So when we presented tips or things that people could do, how are we presenting the behaviors that people can engage in? And then the third were on the content or the prose written about those tips, as well as the images. And we tested these using a series of studies on Amazon's Mechanical Turk, which is kind of a crowdsourced platform to get people to do things, to take small online tasks in return for money. In this case, these were experimental surveys. So while these were not actual customers, when you're just looking to see whether people respond to A versus B, Mechanical Turk provides a great platform for pre-testing, and you can then move on to field. So I'm going to present, and we did, I would say, we've done somewhere between like 4 and 8 within each of these groups, as well as some others, but I'm just going to present one of each to give an example. So when we look at benchmarking, we compared goal-based comparisons to social comparisons, so tracking potential, your business potential versus similar businesses. And we did see in our pre-testing the same thing that we found in our statistical meta-analysis of existing studies, which were goal-based comparisons have the potential to outperform social comparisons. This isn't to say that we should not be using social comparisons. It's just to say that we should continue to explore how we can present different comparative information to maximize that motivational potential, because that comparison is really getting at the motivation. So here's the discrepancy between your use and where it could be, and that could theoretically increase motivation to take action. Then when we looked at behavior segmentation, a lot of people in this industry talk about curtailment and efficiency, or purchase and habit. I have some previous work where we did some customer research, where we did some general customer research in the res sector, and we found that, that people do kind of think that way, but the problem with people thinking in terms of their investment or purchasing decisions and then their efficiency or habitual or curtailment or habitual decisions is that this middle category, maintenance, get clustered in with efficiency. We call it the renter, the psychological renter barrier, the renter blind spot, where things that a renter could do, like changing light bulbs, checking toilets for leaks, get kind of psychologically subsumed into that efficiency I can't do category. And so we really pulled them out, and we're presenting these 3 groups. And we also tested not just the groups themselves, but how we present them. So we used kind of more traditional utility lingo, behavior, maintenance, investment, as well as verbs, act, optimize, and invest, and then some what we call cutesy terms, like low cost, quick win, big savings. And we found that participants responded best to that more colloquial language, that informal, engaging language. Then, when we looked at tip content, we really have tested so many things in here, like breaking down those tips into phrases. And so, for example, there's some theory that suggests loss aversion, that when you frame in terms of loss as opposed to gain, that people are more likely to respond. We actually found in this that saying save up to versus cut costs by increased behavioral intention. Again, this was online, so we were testing intention because we weren't actually testing these with reports, although we're doing that now, which I'll talk about in a second. And then last, I mentioned one of the things that was so interesting to us, surprising and not surprising, was that those images were far more important than it seemed past research in this space had been paying attention to or focusing on image selection. And so we've been doing some image testing, the most robust finding we've seen so far, which is controlling for everything else being the same, the exact same words, the exact same tip. Having a person in the image has a highly significant effect on behavioral intention. People are more likely to say, I am likely to do this, if the picture looks more like the one on the right than the one on the left. So from those, this is a great way, again, to just pick apart reports and test tiny little pieces within it. But when you put Humpty Dumpty back together again, you still need to make sure that those hypotheses hold up. So when we went back to the field, we got PG&E to do something that is not typical in the field. Typically, that gold standard RCT really doesn't experiment within it. It's just testing your program versus a world in which your program doesn't exist. And that's really important to do, but at the same time, something is often better than nothing. So if you take 1,000 starving people, going back to my food analogy, and you give them nothing but Starburst for a month, they might have better health outcomes than the people that were starving. That doesn't mean that Starburst is a healthy diet. So what we need to do and what we're trying to do is within that, it's important to do that RCT, not to starve people, but to have people in a control group, but also to test within in the field to see if our pre-testing hypotheses bear out in the real world. So we're doing that within the current rollout, this Wave 2 pilot. And I'm just going to end with our first test, which was on the welcome letter. So we talked about how people responded better to that cutesy, engaging tone. We've done a couple other tests where engaging language seemed to increase response. So we designed two, and this is the place where I was saying if you're not full screen, you might want to be. We designed 2 letters. Now, we optimized both versions. So we took a lot of what we were learning, and we put a lot of things that we just thought were best practices. Like, we're pretty sure that what we found in A/B testing will hold up, and we optimized the letters. But we did make a couple changes that we wanted to test. So we designed 2 versions, and these look identical, but I'll point out 3 changes, 3 differences. The first is right here at the top, where on the left it says, simply your business has been selected, these reports will give you information. And then the one on the right was a little more, was using the first person, I'm inviting you to join me on this journey. You'll be receiving this set of reports. The second, again, reinforcing that, as opposed to we look forward to working with you, I'm excited to work with you to help you save energy. And that also pulls in the principle of reciprocity, one of Robert Cialdini's suggested persuasion techniques, like help me help you. And then we thought the real kicker here was this last piece, or that really reinforced it, that as opposed to being signed by just PG&E, we wanted to put a face to it. This letter is coming from somebody. In this case, it came from David. David personally reached out to 35,000 people and said, I want to help you. And we put his adorable face on the letter as well. Now, a similar welcome report for another program at PG&E had already gone out. So we had a potential baseline, which was a 1% response rate. So this I didn't include, so there wasn't even more information. There was a tear off at the bottom. And a previous welcome letter had about a 1.8% response to that outreach. We got, with our professional tone that was optimized but not personalized, we got a 7.3% response rate. So it was much higher than that previous program. So you'd think our engaged report would do even better. And what we found was that that engaged version ended up with a 6.1% response rate. Now, you might think that a really smart researcher would not share a finding like this, but I think this is great news because what it means is that we can learn. You shouldn't listen to us. Just because somebody is an expert in advertising or psychology, we don't always get it right, and we want to constantly be testing our assumptions. We can see that a lot of the improvements we made improved response overall, and what we noticed when we went back through, and what I think now, and we're testing with another utility welcome rollout, working with groups like Enernoc is great because what we learn from PG&E we can then apply with another utility and so on and so forth, so we can optimize across utilities, across studies over time as long as we're publishing and sharing this work. What I think was really the kicker was this sentence here, you've been chosen. I think we neglected to identify that is such a powerful thing, that idea of scarcity. We picked you. And we think that might have been the thing that drove that 6.1 to 7.3. And so now we're doing a little cleaner test just on that. And the important thing to say here in closing is that there are huge benefits to simplicity. When we're trying, what we want to give to consumers needs to be simple. You need to give them the right message, the simplest message possible at the exact time they need it. You need to tell them to look out when something heavy is falling on their head. But on the back end, it's not always that easy. And looking for the simplest answer doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the right answer. And we're so lucky that we have this partnership between a research institute like our group, a utility program, and a technology provider, so that we can really be understanding these interactions and making them better and sharing them out so that all of the rising tide can lift all boats, all energy efficiency behavioral programs can improve. And with that, I will toss back to Bruce to
Thanks so much. Yeah, and again, just to emphasize your point there, it's tremendous when the flexibility of the platform, the flexibility of the program, and give us the opportunity to apply and test and learn and drive towards improvement, and that's really of shared value to the utility, of course, but also customers. I just wanted to recap very quickly before we conclude. We did have a question come in, but business customers of critical value to use the utility. As we've seen, the engagement strategies can bring so much together in terms of what they apply and how you test and learn, but they've got to be oriented around and drive towards answers for business customers specifically. And then, of course, leveraging the EIS as a technology and applying the social science really have great potential to optimize the programs. We've had a few questions come in. David, let me lead with one before we turn it back over to John. But it was around whether you have any kilowatt-hour savings figures from DER or more info, more broadly speaking, on the comparison between the control studies, if you've got a very quick minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So the like I mentioned, the results were inconclusive. Unfortunately, in that tight confidence interval that we were looking for, the results both showed savings, but also in the spectrum of where those results came in, some of them kind of crossed over that zero savings threshold. So it wasn't enough evidence for us to move forward to say that these absolutely show savings. I would say the average SMB was around 100 kilowatt hours. For, of course, that kind of varied from 250 to maybe or to some positive numbers on the upper bound, but it was about 1/3% was the savings average over the entire population.
Thanks, and I know that our M&V experts as well are looking at how do we structure it on the front end so that you can have the confidence and get the granularity of results potentially within individual business segments where there's great variation between the size of the consumers within a cohort, so that you're teasing out and really being able to compare and see the savings where they're occurring so that incentives can be properly applied.
Yeah, and I think we'll see a bit of that in ACEEE this summer, so folks that are interested, definitely keep an eye out for that. And then hopefully once we wrap up this phase 2 research, we'll be able to show those results out as well, and hopefully we'll have some more confidence in the numbers.
Great. And just a reminder to folks, just before I hand it back over to John here to conclude, David and Beth and one of my colleagues will be down at CS Week talking further about this program. So I do encourage any of you who are our listeners who are attending to meet with them and see what they're talking about and pose some follow-up questions there. John, thanks for the time. Back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. This has been a great session, very informative. David and Beth, what a great topic and presentation. We want to be mindful of our hour and be respectful of your time, and we want to conclude promptly. So if your questions were not answered, our staff, Amber Weens in our office, will forward these questions to our presenters and after the webinar, and we will get those questions answered and back to you. One quick note before we sign off. Registration is open for CS Week 2016 in Phoenix. Visit our website, csweek.org, or call the office and register today. Again, we want to thank Internoc and our presenters and all of you for joining us today. This will conclude our webinar. Have a great day.